You call that cold? You really don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant Hale chuckled, exhaling a cloud of steam that rose like a ghost in the frigid air. His alien classmates looked at him in shock, their trembling forms bundled in thermal suits that strained under the effort of keeping their bodies warm. To them, the temperature on this ice-covered moon was unbearable, lethal even. Yet here was Hale, a human from a planet they had learned was one of the most dangerous in the galaxy, treating it like a mild inconvenience. "How are you not frozen solid?" sputtered Zurak, his scales darkening as his blood circulation slowed. The Zuran's eyes flicked nervously between Hale and the snowy wasteland stretching out before them. His breath hitched as a gust of icy wind ripped across the group. Hale shrugged casually, snow crunching under his boots as he shifted. "Back home, we call this sweater weather," he said, earning baffled stares from the group of aliens. The class of mixed-species cadets had been assigned to survive the harsh conditions of Yolak 6, a planet known for its extreme cold and merciless storms. It was a standard survival exercise at the Galactic Military Academy, designed to push each species to its limits and see who could endure the longest. For most, it was already too much. "Sweater weather." Another cadet, a Rockin named Kov, repeated, his voice muffled under layers of insulation. The feathered alien's feathers were puffed up in an effort to trap warmth, yet he shivered uncontrollably. "We're lucky if our emergency gear holds up another hour." "Are you serious?" Hale replied, his face showing no signs of discomfort. His nose had barely wrinkled in the cold, and his breathing remained steady despite the thin air. "Humans are built for this stuff. You should see the winters on some parts of Earth. Now, those are brutal." Kov blinked at him, his large eyes struggling to stay open against the stinging cold. "Why aren't your extremities falling off?" Hale gave the Rockin a look of genuine confusion. "Falling off? Why would they?" The group of alien cadets exchanged glances, unsure if this was some kind of joke or if the human was simply out of his mind. They had heard stories about the toughness of Deathworlders, beings from planets classified as extremely hostile to life. But seeing it firsthand was something else entirely. Hale stood there as though they were on a casual stroll through a tempered garden, while they were huddling together, their breath turning to frost. Zurak's mandibles clicked in frustration. This isn't possible. My physiology is perfectly adapted to withstand heat, and even with top-tier tech, I'm barely functional. You, however," he trailed off, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "Look," Hale began, gesturing with a gloved hand toward the distant peaks that shimmered with ice crystals. "This might be unbearable for you guys, but humans have had to deal with worse for millennia. Cold's just another challenge. We've been through ice ages, sub-zero blizzards, the whole deal. You adapt, you overcome, and you figure out how to stay warm. That's just how it is." Another gust of wind cut through the air, sending several cadets staggering backward. Hale, however, barely flinched. "You adapt?" Kov asked incredulously. "How could anyone adapt to this?" "Oh, it's simple," Hale said with a grin. "Just layers and good circulation. There are places on Earth where people live in these conditions year-round, no problem. Well, maybe a little problem, but nothing you can't handle if you're prepared." Zurak's body quivered as he pulled his cloak tighter around himself, his eyes wide with disbelief. "But you're not prepared. You're wearing standard-issue gear like the rest of us." Hale looked down at his simple cold-weather gear, a far cry from the complex thermal systems his fellow cadets wore, and smirked. "Yeah, well, that's because I'm from a death world, remember? Earth got some pretty nasty tricks up its sleeve, and cold is just one of them." "This is just one?" Kov croaked, his beak twitching as he tried to stay composed. "Well, sure," Hale replied casually, rubbing his hands together to generate a bit of warmth. "It's one of the easier ones, actually. The cold's predictable, you know. You can prepare for it, find ways to deal with it. You know what's coming. It's the unpredictable things that get you back home." Cobb made a sound somewhere between a cough and a groan. "This is easier. You think this is cold? Wait until you hear about frostbite. Hale chuckled. Zack's mandibles twitched nervously. I'm not sure I want to know, Zurak murmured. Hale tilted his head, as if considering something. No, maybe not. You guys have it rough enough as it is. But really, the trick is to not think about it too much. Once you get past the initial shock, you focus on moving, staying active. That's the key. Zurak and Cobb exchanged worried glances. Their species, neither built for endurance nor the cold, were at the brink of collapse. The alien cadets had been briefed about human adaptability, but experiencing it firsthand was another matter entirely. This was more than simple resilience. It was as if the human before them was indifferent to the cold itself, treating it like a passing nuisance. Another cadet, GRS, a hulking creature covered in thick fur, growled in frustration. You're telling me this whole survival exercise is just a mild annoyance to you? His voice was laced with disbelief. Hale shrugged, his breath forming brief, ghostly puffs. Pretty much. Like I said, it's all about mindset. We've dealt with worse, so this isn't that bad. GRS let out a low growl, clearly offended. This isn't bad? My species hibernates during conditions like these. Hale raised an eyebrow. Then it's a good thing you've got me here. I'll show you how to deal with it. The group fell silent for a moment, watching Hale in a mixture of awe and confusion. He wasn't exaggerating or mocking them. He genuinely saw their freezing ordeal as little more than an obstacle to be managed. You're insane, Zurak muttered, though there was a hint of admiration in his voice. Hale chuckled softly. Nah, just human. The cold had settled in, harsh and unrelenting. The sun, barely visible through the thick clouds, hung low in the sky, casting a dim light that offered no warmth. Every breath the alien cadets took seemed to freeze in their throats, their bodies stiffening as the temperature continued to drop. Sergeant Hale, on the other hand, moved effortlessly through the snow, stopping occasionally to look back at his struggling classmates. Keep moving, fellas, Hale called, his voice clear and steady as if they were out for a casual walk instead of battling freezing conditions. Sitting still is what gets you. You've got to stay active, keep the blood flowing. Zurak, visibly shaking under his thermal gear, looked up at him, his wide eyes full of desperation. We've been walking for hours, he gasped. How much further? Hale checked his wrist comm, glancing at the route displayed on the small screen. Not too far now, just over that ridge. He pointed to a distant icy hill that shimmered under the pale light. There's an old research station up ahead. We'll get you inside, warm you up. You're sure it's still there? Kov asked, his voice weak, his legs wobbling beneath him as he swayed slightly. The wind howled around them, and his feathers, usually bright and iridescent, had dulled under the cold. Hale gave him a reassuring nod. It's there. Don't worry. Just stay with me. GRS, the largest of the group, let out a low rumbling growl as he trudged through the deep snow. His fur was matted with frost, and his massive form moved slowly, each step seeming like an enormous effort. You say this is nothing? He grunted, his voice strained. Hale glanced at GRS, who looked like he was about to collapse. It's all relative, my friend. Sure, it's cold, but you got to put it in perspective. I mean, we've had winters on Earth where entire cities got buried in snow. Temperatures dropped so low it was hard to even breathe. He waved his hand at the frozen landscape around them. This is just a brisk day out. Kov let out a weak laugh, though it sounded more like a cough. I can't believe it. How does anyone live in a place like that? Survival, Hale replied simply. You adapt. Learn to cope. It's in our nature. He glanced at Zurak, whose shaking had become more violent with every step. You've got this. You just need to focus on one thing, getting to the station. That's all that matters right now. Zurak's mandibles clicked together as he forced himself to keep moving. His vision blurred from the cold, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest. Yet somehow, Hale's calmness seemed to provide a strange source of strength. If this human could walk through the freezing winds like it was nothing, surely he could make it a little further. The wind picked up again, howling with a fierce, icy bite. Snow whipped around them in flurries, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Hale stopped, squinting into the white expanse ahead. "Storm's picking up," Hale muttered. "We'll need to hurry." Cobb stumbled forward, his wings dragging in the snow. "I don't think I can go much further." Hale's gaze sharpened as he stepped over to the alien. "You can? You're not that far gone yet, Cobb. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. You're stronger than you think." He grabbed Cobb's arm, steadying him. "One foot in front of the other. That's all you've got to focus on." GRS growled in frustration, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Why don't you feel this? You barely look cold." Hale smiled slightly, though his eyes remained focused on the path ahead. "Oh, I feel it. Just used to ignoring it. You have to find a way to push it to the back of your mind. Thinking about the cold just makes it worse." Zurak stumbled, nearly falling face first into the snow, but Hale reached out to catch him. "Easy there," Hale said, pulling the Zarin back to his feet. "Just a little further. We're almost there." "I can't," Zurak gasped, his eyes wide with panic. "I can't feel my legs. My circulation's shutting down." "Don't worry about that," Hale said, tightening his grip on Zurak's arm. "Your legs are still working. I'll help you if you need it." The group pushed on, the ridge looming closer with every step. The alien cadets, despite their advanced gear, were barely holding on. Hale remained their anchor, guiding them through the storm with a steady, unshakable presence. As they neared the ridge, Hale stopped and pointed ahead. "There," he said, his voice cutting through the wind. "The station's just beyond that ridge. We're almost home." Zurak blinked through the blowing snow, his vision barely focusing. He could just make out the shape of a structure in the distance. Small but real. "We're going to make it." Hale grinned. "Of course we are. We've got each other. That's all we need." Kov let out a weak laugh, though it quickly turned into a cough. "You really are insane." "Maybe," Hale said with a shrug, "but I've survived worse, and so will you." GRS, his muscles screaming in protest, let out a low growl. "If we survive this, I'll never question you again, human." Hale chuckled. "Deal. Now come on, let's get you guys inside before you freeze solid." He took a few steps forward, glancing back at the group with that same confident grin. "We'll be drinking hot rations in no time." The ridge loomed ahead, the final barrier between them and the safety of the station. The storm howled louder, but the promise of warmth and Hale's unyielding calm pushed them forward. They weren't done yet. The group struggled up the ridge, their bodies drained of nearly every ounce of energy. Each step was a monumental effort for the alien cadets, and even the mighty GRS was beginning to stumble. Hale kept his pace steady, never rushing, always keeping a watchful eye on his classmates. He knew they were on the edge, but they weren't finished yet. "Almost there," Hale said for what felt like the 100th time. Though this time it was true. The station was just over the ridge, a squat structure barely visible through the swirling snow. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Kov tripped on a patch of ice and collapsed into the snow. I can't," he gasped. "I can't move anymore." Hale crouched next to him, shaking his head. "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "You've made it this far, Kov. You've got a little more in you. Trust me." Kov groaned, his breath shallow, his feathers drooping. Hale pulled him up, supporting the alien under one arm. Zurak and GRS, seeing this, found a last burst of energy. Together, they pushed forward as one, dragging their frozen bodies up the final slope. At the top of the ridge, the wind seemed to die down for a moment, as if the planet itself was giving them a brief reprieve. Hale led the way, his steps confident and sure. With a final effort, they crested the hill and saw the station up close, a stark, weather-beaten building standing as a testament to survival. "Made it," Hale said, breathing a little heavier now, his hands still moving with practiced ease. Now, let's get inside and warm up. The cadets collapsed in a heap just outside the entrance, their limbs trembling with exhaustion. One by one, they made their way inside, where the warmth of the station's emergency heating system embraced them like a long-awaited hug. Hale, however, stood by the door, watching his classmates with a smile. "See," he said quietly. "Told you. It's all about mindset.